you geeks! When The Wheel of Time came out, there were a lot of concerns that the costumes were too clean or too cheap or just looked wrong. Today, I'm taking a stab at explaining this phenomenon. I did some theatrical costuming in high school and college, watched Project Runway back when it was good, and now subscribe to the likes of Bernadette Banner.
I'm kind of an expert.
I've also done some sewing on this channel. I don't think the costumes were wrong or cheap. Like, Rand wearing this sweater in Emond's Field looks fine. It's rather the context and the conventional rules of stage costuming, using cohesion, iconography, and distinction among characters to visually tell their story. Amazon broke one too many of these rules because they didn't want to look like other fantasy. They achieved this goal, but undercut the costume's ability to positively contribute to the narrative. Spoilers through season 1 of the Wheel of Time TV show and general Wheel of Time world-building lore. Cohesion. The Wheel of Time show makes a point of saying that their costuming is wholly indicative of nationality.
Aren't many things outside accent and dress that can tell you where a person's from.
But I do not think it lives up to that boast. While I was sick the other week, I made the poor decision of watching Netflix's Vikings Valhalla. The Vikings series was known for transforming our image of Vikings into punk rockers. This spin-off doesn't quite have the same groundbreaking power, but it still used costumes effectively that I could follow the plot even while nodding in and out of consciousness. The first episode follows a group of Greenlanders landing in Norway. They're shown almost all wearing gray furs and dark colors, which fiercely contrast the marketplace of Kattegat. Likewise, in The Lord of the Rings, the hobbits are clad in bright, clean colors that stand out in the dingy Bree common room, even in dark lighting. The Fellowship is also known for their uniform green cloaks and brooches, which they wear over their own regional dress, showing unity yet individuality. I don't want the Wheel of Time to be a paint-by-numbers show like Valhalla, but the Wheel of Time spun too far in the other direction. When looking at the Emond's Field 5, I see nothing that visually unifies them all. Rand and Nynaeve both have sheepskin coats. Egwene has one, but hers is finished differently. While those three have a lighter palette, Mat and Perrin are dark. Most of them share this wrap style collar, which I'll call the Andoran collar, though Rand is slightly different. These little differences make a big difference when Rand and Mat stumble into the Four Kings Inn, and we, the audience, can't immediately see how they stand out from everyone else in the room. Heck, Rand and Mat even match the Breen Spring color palette, making lines like this.
Who says I'm from the Two Rivers?
It's written all over you. Your speech, your dress.
Difficult to believe. Mat and Rand do stand out a bit when they reach Tar Valon, but that's because they acquired the new cloaks, not Two Rivers cloaks. We see two road-weary yet savvy travelers whose pastel country clothes would have fit in better in the big city.
I can see from your clothing that you're world-traveling types.
Meanwhile, Perrin and Egwene don't have as much of this problem because they stumble into the Tuatha'an. The traveling people and their ponchos, along with the white cloaks and their white tabards, are actually brilliant examples of cohesion working in this show. While some people complain that the Tinkers aren't brilliantly colored enough, I think their garb is distinctive. We see them dress Perrin and Egwene in their colors. So a month later, we can see visual confirmation of Egwene, at least, taking on Tinker ways. Meanwhile, the White Cloaks remain as stark as ever. In their confrontation, it's pure white against many colors, and excellently evokes the flower power of the 60s that I think is a notable theme in the books. Ultimately, dressing characters cohesively is shorthand for showing conflict or contrasting ideologies and cultures. A lack of cohesion within similar culture groups like the Emond's Field Five sends mixed messages to the audience. Iconography. But Jackie, or Miss Skirt, I hear you say. The point of the Emond's Field Five is that they are all their own characters. Their story is about them diverging, having their own problems, and becoming their own people. I agree, but Jordan and the early books and basic costuming rules dictate that when characters dress cohesively, they carry different things. Cohesive dressing at the beginning only heightens character growth at the end if they are dressed differently. Back in Valhalla, the group may have arrived dressed the same, but it ends with the only living girl wearing the armor of a shield maiden, and Leif Erikson berserking shirtless covered in blood. The difference is clear. Likewise, Hamilton, the pioneer of colorblind casting, only worked because each character was so perfectly dressed for their role and station that the audience did not need further trappings of realism to convey their character. For the Wheel of Time, Nynaeve kept her braid in its magnificence, but it lost some of its uniqueness when Egwene kept her braid too. I think the show tried to convey Egwene's chameleon nature by changing her coats, though they always stay pinkish. Matt has the dagger for most of the series. Then the pandemic happened. So our later dagger shenanigans without Matt isn't really the costumer's fault, but it is the show's fault that Rand's sword gets sidelined. There were ample opportunities to show off that sword. When the White Cloak stopped them, when Tom takes the boys under his wing, and when they arrive at Fal Dara. Although Rand's reliance on the bow makes sense, the show uses it to middling effect. It could have been better if every other episode, Rand had to explain that no, he is not a blade master, it's his father's sword. He prefers his trusty Two Rivers longbow. The sword, at least, gets better treatment than the axe, which appears only in episode 1, then Perrin drops it for obvious reasons. Matt gives him a knife later, good for Matt.
She always said she didn't make weapons, she made tools.
But this never gets returned to. In the last episode, Perrin picks up whatever this is. If it's an axe, its head's on upside down.
Tiny's push and you choose the dog.
Here would be an opportune moment for Perrin to try and say, it's not a weapon, it's a tool, and get choked up. True, he would still be in the same spot as his character was in episode 1, but it at least would give the audience insight into his thoughts, which the show currently doesn't do. Rand also looks the same, though he's ditched the coat, which is an improvement. While Egwene and Nynaeve's clothes don't really convey the arc about the student surpassing the teacher. Egwene is wearing the same shirt, while Nynaeve doesn't have the Andoran collar, but she's been wearing that shirt since episode 3. Maybe that wilder circle of doom could have burned off Egwene's braid as a sign of her change. Without clear icons around which we can measure our character's behavior, it's difficult to see how much they've grown or changed. Distinction. Back in my foggy haze of watching Vikings Valhalla, I noted how the show visually displayed division within an otherwise united people. The Vikings are divided between Christian and pagan, a division they show by giving Christians crosses on their necks and hockey haircuts. For those of you not from the state of hockey, this is what hockey hair looks like, while giving the pagans all wild men with flowing locks. There is, of course, the one Christian leader who keeps his hair up in a series of well-kept man buns under which his people can unite. By late in the series, you can still tell who is Christian Viking, pagan Viking, and English, even though one Viking had sub-Saharan ancestry. In the Wheel of Time, the Aes Sedai are the singular group whose division drives the plot. From an adaptational perspective, this was a costumer's nightmare, since in the books the Aes Sedai are only visually united by their ageless faces, an effect practically impossible to convey on screen.
It's not going to happen.
They also had their rings, which were small, subtle things, but in the show they are big and chunky, probably to be seen on camera as a unifying feature, but I don't think it landed. The other great problem with visually adapting the Aes Sedai from the books is that they did not always dress in their Ajah colors, even though their Ajahs were an important part of their characters. The costumers made, I think, the right choice and had them wear their Ajah colors all the time. Even though it creates problems for later series, this is a small issue for me. The big issue is that even inside these color block distinctions, we see very little unity. In the books, the Aes Sedai are supposed to have put aside national identity in favor of being Aes Sedai. Moreover, if any group of women lived together in the same climate long enough, I'd expect to see more cohesion among their clothes. Like in the Midwestern fall, when all girls who are clearly not like other girls all dressed like Han Solo. More cohesive costuming would convey a sense of unity, which the rings themselves don't carry. According to Bernadette Banner, who sewed Moiraine's outfit for funsies, the Aes Sedai have similar shoulder pieces.
I also feel the urge to point out that it looks like Alana has got a little shoulder seam configuration, something going on in her gown as well, so maybe this is just like an Aes Sedai cultural thing where you put piecings in the shoulders because reasons.
This is not intuitively obvious to the casual viewer. Instead, the costumes convey that each woman looks like a wise woman in her own right, yet among the blues, we have Moiraine looking like a storybook sorceress when she dons formal dress, not so much when she enters the Winespring Inn, while Megan looks more like a dean of a contemporary college. Together, despite their blue color, they don't look like they belong to the same order. Not like Gandalf and Saruman, who match despite wearing decidedly different colors. Megan actually is dressed more like Bloody Uno up in Fal Dara, with a formal vest and shirt combo thing. Oddly, Lady Amalisa, Uno's own wise woman in residence, looks decidedly out of place in episode 7, though she looks better in the finale. If Megan and episode 7 Amalisa switched outfits but kept their own color palette, then Megan would fit better in the lush and lavish Tar Valon setting, while Amalisa would look more utilitarian in the military outpost of Fal Dara, but bringing a decidedly feminine touch to the stark life of a warrior. Every Aes Sedai is so distinct that I don't know which distinctions, besides color, are significant and which are mere fancy. Ironically, by over-individualizing each character, I learn less about each character and how they stand in relation to their world. In conclusion, the costumes look weird not because they are cheap or too clean. They look weird because they do not follow the conventions we are used to seeing in fantasy costumes. Instead of breaking a few rules wisely to make a clear statement, the show broke too many conventions, leaving a look that was too muddled to tell the casual viewer what was going on. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you would like to see more. Your patronage is greatly appreciated.